Commander Thexari stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the dead world turn slowly below. Kepler 442b had once been home to 3 million humans. Now it was just rock and empty cities. 300 years had passed since the humans vanished. One day they were there, building colonies and trading with other species. The next day, silence. Every human world went dark at the same time. No emergency signals, no final messages, no ships trying to escape. They were just gone. Thexari's people, the Zalani, had celebrated when it happened. Most species did. Humans were trouble. They expanded too fast, asked too many questions, and never followed the rules that kept the galaxy peaceful. When they disappeared, everyone breathed easier. "Sir, we're picking up those strange signals again," said his communications officer, a young Zalani with the blue skin markings of the lower caste. Thexari walked over to look at the readings. For the past month, their sensors had been detecting odd energy patterns from the edge of the galaxy. The signals were weak but getting stronger. They came from sectors that had been empty space for centuries. "Same pattern as before?" Thexari asked. "Yes, sir, but the signal is 30% stronger than yesterday." Thexari frowned. His ship patrolled the old human border zones. These dead worlds served as a buffer between Zalani space and the unknown. Nothing was supposed to be out there. The galaxy had changed a lot since the humans left. The Zalani Empire had become the strongest military power. Their technology was better than everyone else's, and their social system kept everything organized. Below them were the merchant species like the Korthak, who moved goods between worlds. Then came dozens of smaller civilizations, all following the rules the Zalani set. It was a good system, peaceful, predictable, safe. Thexari had been born 50 years after the humans vanished. He had learned about them in school, but they seemed more like a story than real history. His teachers described them as violent and chaotic. They said humans started wars over small things and never knew when to stop fighting. The humans were lucky they disappeared when they did, his instructor had said. We were preparing to limit their expansion. They were becoming dangerous, but standing here above their empty world, Thexari wondered about that story. The human cities below looked peaceful. Their buildings were made to last, with parks and schools mixed in with the factories. These didn't look like the homes of violent monsters. "Sir, incoming message from High Command," the communications officer said. The message was from Admiral Vextar, the commander of the entire border fleet. His image appeared on the main screen, showing the golden skin markings that meant he was from the highest Zalani caste. "Commander Thexari, report to Zalani Prime immediately. We have a situation." The message ended without explanation. Thexari felt a chill. Admiral Vextar never called ships back from patrol unless something was very wrong. 3 days later, Thexari stood in the Great War Room on Zalani Prime. Dozens of other commanders were there, along with admirals and government officials. The room was filled with holographic displays, showing star maps and fleet positions. Admiral Vextar stood at the center, his expression grim. "We have received disturbing reports from our deep space monitoring stations. Something is approaching from outside the galaxy." A new hologram appeared, showing the galaxy from above. Red dots marked the positions of unknown contacts at the very edge of known space. "These vessels are massive," the Admiral continued. "Larger than anything in our databases. They're moving slowly but directly toward inhabited systems. Our scouts have tried to make contact, but there's been no response." A younger officer raised his hand. "Could they be human ships? Maybe the humans didn't disappear. Maybe they just went to the edge of the galaxy." Admiral Vextar's expression grew darker. "Impossible. We've detected biosignatures from these ships. Whatever is aboard them isn't human. It isn't any species we know." The room fell silent. For 300 years, the galaxy had been a closed system. All the species knew each other. Trade routes were established. Borders were agreed upon. The idea of truly alien visitors was terrifying. "What are your orders, sir?" Thexari asked. "We're mobilizing the entire fleet, every ship, every station. If these visitors are hostile, we need to be ready." But even as he said it, Thexari could see the doubt in the Admiral's eyes. The Zalani military was strong, but they were used to fighting other civilized species. Wars with rules, battles with objectives that made sense. What did you do when something completely unknown came calling? Over the following weeks, more reports came in. The unknown ships had entered the outer systems. They weren't attacking yet, but they weren't communicating either. They just moved from star to star, scanning everything with energy beams that made space itself glow. Then came the day that changed everything. Thexari was back on patrol, his ship stationed near the old human world, when his sensors lit up with emergency signals. The outer colonies were under attack, but these weren't the unknown ships. These were something else entirely. The reports came in broken pieces. Ships that looked like they were grown instead of built. Weapons that turned metal into living tissue. Attackers that seemed to learn from every defense thrown at them. "They came out of nowhere," gasped the voice of Captain Zexmi from the outer colony of Thyrus. "They don't use normal engines. They just appear, and when we shoot them, they adapt." Our weapons stopped working after the first few hits. The transmission ended in static. Within hours, 3 more colonies went silent. The attacks were coordinated, hitting multiple systems at once. Whatever was attacking them was smart, organized, and completely ruthless. Admiral Vextar's face appeared on screens across the fleet. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions. We're dealing with an invasion force unlike anything we've ever faced." But Thexari wasn't thinking about defensive positions. He was thinking about those energy signals his ship had been detecting. The ones coming from the empty sectors where humans used to live. The signals were much stronger now, and they seemed to be responding to something. As his ship turned away from the dead human world, Thexari looked back one more time. For just a moment, he thought he saw lights in the darkness of space beyond the planet. Not the harsh lights of normal ships, but something else, something that had been waiting. The galaxy had enjoyed 3 centuries of peace without humans. They had built a civilization based on order, rules, and predictable behavior. They had created a system where everyone knew their place, and nothing unexpected ever happened. Now something very unexpected was happening, and the only ones who might know how to deal with the truly unexpected were gone. Or were they? As alarms blared across his bridge and reports of new attacks flooded in, Thexari found himself thinking about the human cities below. They had been built to last. Built by people who expected trouble and prepared for it. Maybe the galaxy had been wrong about humans. Maybe they hadn't been chaotic and violent. Maybe they had just been ready for the chaos and violence that was always coming, and maybe, just maybe, they still were. The creature that had once been Captain Zexmi no longer remembered his name. The thing that controlled his body now called itself Node 7739, and it was hungry. The attack on Thyrus Colony had been perfect. The Devourers had learned much from consuming the first few defenders. Their bioships had adapted to Zalani weapons within hours. By the end of the first day, every living thing on the planet had been absorbed into the collective. Node 7739 stood in what used to be the colony's command center, but the walls were now covered in living tissue that pulsed with alien thoughts. Through this organic network, it could feel the presence of millions of other nodes spread across dozens of conquered worlds. The Devourers had been traveling between galaxies for thousands of years. They had consumed entire civilizations, learning from each one and growing stronger. This galaxy was just their latest feeding ground. But something was different here. The local species were fighting back harder than expected, and there were strange energy readings coming from the empty sectors that made the collective uneasy. 3 weeks after the first attacks, Admiral Vextar stood in the ruins of his command center on Zalani Prime. Half the fleet was gone. A quarter of all Zalani worlds had fallen silent. The enemy ships adapted to every weapon they used, every tactic they tried. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Korthak Federation," reported his aide, her voice shaking. The hologram showed Chancellor Brixton, the leader of the Merchant Federation. His usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. "Admiral, our outer trade routes are compromised. The attackers hit 6 of our cargo hubs simultaneously. They're not just destroying our ships, they're learning from them. Each attack is more effective than the last." Vextar nodded grimly. "We're seeing the same pattern. These aren't normal invaders. There's something else entirely." "What do they want?" Brixton asked. "Everything," Vextar replied. "They want to consume everything." More species joined the emergency conference. The insectoid Klithik, the gas-dwelling, Vorthak, the crystalline resonance. Every major civilization in the galaxy was under attack, and they were all losing. The enemy called themselves Devourers, according to the few survivors who had been rescued from attacked worlds. They didn't negotiate. They didn't make demands. They simply consumed all biological matter they encountered and turned it into more of themselves. Dr. Felara, the galaxy's leading expert on xenobiology, had studied the remains of devourer bioships. Her report was terrifying. "They're not just a species," she explained to the gathered leaders. "They're a living ecosystem. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier is part of a single organism that spans millions of individuals. When they absorb new life forms, they don't just kill them, they add their knowledge and abilities to the collective." "How do we fight something like that?" asked Commander Thexari, who had been promoted after most of his superiors were killed. "I don't think we can," Dr. Felara admitted. "They've consumed hundreds of galaxies. Every defense we try, they've seen before." The room fell, silent. These were the leaders of the most advanced civilizations in known space, and they were admitting defeat. "There is one possibility," said an old Korthak historian named Greknor. His voice was quiet, almost ashamed. "The humans." Everyone turned to look at him. The word human hadn't been spoken in official meetings for decades. "The humans disappeared 300 years ago," Admiral Vextar said. "They're gone." "Are they?" Greknor asked. "We never found bodies. We never found wreckage. We never found any trace of where they went. What if they didn't disappear? What if they just left?" "Left? For where?" demanded Chancellor Brixton. Greknor activated a star chart showing the galaxy. He highlighted the empty sectors beyond the old human territories. Deep space monitoring has been detecting energy signatures from these regions for months. Signatures that don't match any known technology. Thexari leaned forward. "I know about those signals. My ship detected them before the attack started. They've been getting stronger." "Strong enough to be ships?" asked Dr. Felara. "Strong enough to be entire fleets," Thexari admitted. The leaders looked at each other with a mixture of hope and fear. Humans had been the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. They expanded aggressively, asked uncomfortable questions, and never followed established protocols. Most civilizations had been relieved when they vanished, but humans had also been the best fighters. When conflicts arose, human soldiers and human ships had a reputation for winning against impossible odds. They had a way of finding solutions that other species couldn't imagine. "Even if they're out there," Admiral Vextar said slowly, "why would they help us? We weren't exactly friendly when they left." "Because," said Greknor, "humans never could stand to watch genocide happen. Even when they were angry at other species, they always helped refugees and defended the weak." The debate went on for hours. Some argued that humanity was gone forever. Others insisted that even if humans were alive, they had no reason to help the galaxy that had rejected them. Finally, Chancellor Brixton stood up. "We're going to die anyway if we do nothing. The Devourers will consume every world in the galaxy within a year. What do we have to lose?" The decision was made. They would send messages into the empty sectors where the strange signals originated. They would broadcast on all frequencies, in every language they remembered from the old human databases. Thexari volunteered to carry the first message. His ship was fast and had the best sensors for detecting the mysterious energy signatures. As he flew toward the edge of known space, he practiced the words he would broadcast. When he reached the border of the empty sectors, he activated every communication system on his ship. The message went out in standard human English, then in the dozens of other human languages they had on file. "This is Commander Thexari of the Zalani Empire, broadcasting to any human receivers. Our galaxy is under attack by an enemy we cannot defeat. They call themselves Devourers, and they consume all life they encounter. Millions of beings have already died. Entire worlds have fallen silent." He paused, thinking about the words his people would never want him to say. "We know we were not always friends. We know many of us were glad when you disappeared. But we need help. We are begging for help. If you can hear this message, if you still exist somewhere out there, please. We are sorry. We were wrong. Come back. Help us, please." Similar messages went out from dozens of ships, broadcast toward every empty sector where the strange signals had been detected. The galaxy's proudest civilizations humbled themselves before species they had once dismissed as primitive troublemakers. Days passed with no response. Then weeks. The Devourer attacks continued, growing more coordinated and devastating with each assault. More worlds fell silent. More fleets were consumed and turned against their former allies. Just when hope was fading, the signals from the empty sectors changed. They became stronger, more focused, and they began to move. Something in the darkness beyond known space had heard their prayers for mercy. Something was stirring in response to their desperate pleas for help. But as Thexari watched his instruments, tracked the approaching signals, he began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. The energy readings were unlike anything in their databases. The power levels were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had prayed for mercy from humanity. But what if what came back was no longer quite human? What if 300 years of isolation had changed them into something else? What if their prayers were about to be answered in ways they never expected? Deep in the Kepler 452 system, something that had been sleeping for 3 centuries began to wake up. The automated relay station had been drifting silent in the cold space between planets since the day humanity pulled back from the galaxy. Now, its sensors detected the desperate broadcasts from the core worlds, and ancient programming came alive. Lights flickered on in corridors that had been dark for generations. Massive computers that had been running on minimal power suddenly surged to full operation. And across thousands of light years, similar stations began responding to the wake-up call. Dr. Sarah Chen had been only 35 when humanity made the Great Withdrawal. Now she was over 300 years old, though advanced medical technology had kept her body young and strong. She stood in the Central Council chamber on New Geneva, watching as representatives from 1,000 human worlds debated their response to the galaxy's plea for help. The chamber was built inside a massive space station that orbited a star not found on any alien star chart. Like all human settlements in the Outer Rim, it was hidden by technology that bent light and gravity around it. To the rest of the galaxy, this system appeared empty. "They called us violent," said Counselor Martinez, his voice filled with old anger. "They said we were too aggressive, too unpredictable. They wanted us gone, and we gave them what they wanted." "Children judge quickly," replied Counselor Okafor, an elderly woman whose family had been among the first to settle in the Outer Rim. "The galaxy was young 300 years ago. Perhaps it has learned wisdom." Sarah had lived through the debates that led to the Great Withdrawal. She remembered the fear in alien diplomats' eyes when human ships appeared in their systems. She remembered the trade restrictions, the territorial disputes, and the constant accusations that humanity was too dangerous to be trusted. But she also remembered why they had really pulled back from galactic civilization. "Show them the analysis," she said quietly. The chamber's main display activated, showing detailed scans of the attacking force. The images were taken by hidden human observation posts that had been monitoring the galaxy for centuries. "Biomechanical integration at the cellular level," reported Dr. Kim, humanity's leading expert on hostile xenoforms. "They're not just invaders, they're a plague. They consume everything organic and convert it into more of themselves. Left unchecked, they'll strip every world in the galaxy of all life." "We've seen this before," Sarah added. "Not here, but in other galaxies. We've been tracking this species for 200 years, waiting for them to arrive." The chamber erupted in surprised voices. "You knew they were coming?" demanded Counselor Martinez. "We knew something like them was coming," Sarah corrected. "When we withdrew from the galaxy, it wasn't just because the other species feared us. It was because we had detected signs of this threat in deep space. We tried to warn the galactic community, but they dismissed our concerns as human paranoia." She activated another display, showing the galaxy as it was 3 centuries ago. Human settlements were marked in blue, with exploration routes extending far beyond the galactic rim. While other species focused on internal politics and trade agreements, we were exploring the void between galaxies. We found the remains of civilizations consumed by these devourers. Entire galaxy clusters stripped of life. We realized that our galaxy was directly in their path. "So we prepared," continued Dr. Kim. "We withdrew to the outer rim and spent 3 centuries developing the tools and weapons needed to fight them. Every human world became a research station. Every human mind focused on solving the puzzle of how to stop an enemy that adapts to everything thrown at it." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't disappeared in fear or defeat. They had been preparing for a war that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know was coming. "The question now," said Counselor Okafor, "is whether we should help those who cast us out." The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. They had the power to save the galaxy, but did they have the obligation? Some argued for isolation. "Let them face the consequences of their choices," said Counselor Petrov. "They wanted us gone. Why should we sacrifice human lives for species that never trusted us?" Others spoke of duty. "Innocent beings are dying," argued Counselor Singh. "Children who never voted to exile us, entire species that had no say in those ancient political decisions." Sarah listened to both sides, but her mind was already made up. She had helped design the human response protocols during the early years of the withdrawal. She knew what their founders had intended. "There's something you all need to understand," she said, when the debate paused. "This isn't about whether we help them. It's about whether we return to being the species we were before." She stood and walked to the center of the chamber. 300 years ago, we were explorers, inventors, and protectors. We made mistakes, yes. We were sometimes too aggressive in our expansion, but we never walked away from people who needed help. The galaxy pushed us away because they feared what we might become if we stayed. Now we have the chance to show them what we became while we were gone. The vote, when it came, was closer than she had hoped, but decisive enough to act on. Humanity would respond to the galaxy's call for help, but it wouldn't be the same humanity that had left. In the weeks that followed, the outer rim came alive with activity that defied belief. Shipyards that had been building in secret for centuries released vessels that looked more like living things than machines. Fleets that moved through space without leaving energy signatures began positioning themselves at the edge of galactic space. The technology humanity had developed during their isolation was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to bend space and time, to create weapons that existed partially in other dimensions. But the most important change wasn't technological. It was philosophical. Captain James Wright stood on the bridge of the UHS Determination, watching as his ship approached the first battle zone. His crew was made up of humans who had been born in the Outer Rim, people who had never seen an alien face except in historical records. "Sir, we're detecting Devourer bioships ahead," reported his tactical officer. "They're attacking a Zalani colony. Civilian population approximately 4 million. Wright nodded calmly. "Begin rescue operations. Prioritize non-combatants and children. Military personnel are secondary." "What about the Devourer ships, sir?" Wright's expression didn't change. "Eliminate them. All of them. Use Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was something the old humanity would never have considered. It was a weapon that didn't just destroy enemy ships. It made it impossible for the Devourers to adapt to the attack. It deleted them from existence so completely that their collective consciousness couldn't learn from the encounter. It was a terrible weapon, designed by people who had 3 centuries to think about how to fight an enemy that learned from every defeat. As the Determination moved into battle, Wright thought about the messages his people had received from the galaxy. Desperate pleas for mercy and forgiveness from species that had once demanded humanity leave them alone. But humanity wasn't coming back to forgive or to be forgiven. They were coming back to do what they had always done: protect the innocent and destroy the things that threatened them. The galaxy had prayed for mercy, and mercy was what they would receive. But it would be mercy delivered with the cold efficiency of people who had spent 3 centuries learning how to wage war against the impossible. The old humanity had been chaotic and unpredictable. The new humanity was something far more dangerous. They were organized, prepared, and absolutely certain of their purpose. The Devourers had made a mistake. They had attacked a galaxy under human protection. They just didn't know it yet. The first sign that something had changed came from the Thyrus system, where the Devourers had established one of their primary hive nodes. Node 7739, still wearing the consumed body of Captain Zexme, was coordinating attacks on 3 nearby worlds when every bioship in the system suddenly screamed. It wasn't a sound that could be heard. It was a psychic shriek that tore through the collective consciousness like a blade. In seconds, Node 7739 lost contact with 17,000 drones across the outer rim of the system. They simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, the collective could feel destruction and learn from it. These drones had been deleted so completely that the hive mind couldn't even remember what they had been doing when they vanished. Commander Thexari was monitoring communications from his ship when the reports started flooding in. Devourer attacks on 3 different systems had suddenly stopped. Not retreated, stopped. The bioships had gone completely silent. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission on old human emergency frequencies," his communications officer reported, her voice shaking with excitement. The message was brief and spoken in perfect standard galactic. "Zalani vessel, this is Captain Wright of the Human Defense Force. Please maintain a distance of 50,000 kilometers from the combat zone and prepare to receive survivors." Thexari stared at the screen. After 300 years of silence, the first human words to his people were calm, professional instructions, as if no time had passed at all. "Captain Wright, this is Commander Thexari. We're grateful for your response to our distress calls. Acknowledged, Commander. We are implementing rescue protocols for all civilian populations in this sector. Military cooperation will be coordinated through your high command. Right out." The transmission ended, leaving Thexari staring at empty space. Then his sensors lit up with contacts that hadn't been there moments before. Ships appeared around the Devourer-controlled worlds, not emerging from hyperspace, but simply materializing as if space itself had folded to bring them there. They were unlike anything in the galactic databases, smooth, organic curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. No visible weapons, no obvious propulsion systems. And they were huge. The smallest human ship was twice the size of Thexari's cruiser. What happened next would be studied by military strategists for generations. The human ships didn't engage in battle, they performed an operation. Each vessel moved with precise coordination, targeting specific nodes in the Devourer. Bio-network with weapons that seemed to edit reality itself. When a human weapon fired, the target didn't explode or break apart. It simply stopped existing, leaving behind perfectly spherical voids in space that hurt to look at. Within 6 hours, the Thyrus system was completely clear of Devourers. Every bioship, every infected piece of matter, every trace of the collective consciousness, gone. In their place were rescue vessels pulling survivors from planets that had been written off as lost. Admiral Vexitar watched the tactical displays from his command ship, trying to understand what he was seeing. Human vessels were systematically appearing at every major Devourer concentration, performing the same impossible operations. "How are they doing this?" he asked Dr. Felara, who was analyzing the sensor data. "I don't know," she admitted. "Their weapons don't follow any known principles of physics. They're not using energy or matter to destroy the Devourers, they're doing something else entirely." "Sir," interrupted his aide, "we're receiving a communication request from a human vessel. They want to coordinate with our fleet." The hologram that appeared showed a human woman in a simple gray uniform. She looked young, but her eyes held the weight of centuries. "Admiral Vexitar, I am Captain Sarah Chen of the UHS New Geneva. I will be serving as your liaison during our joint operations against the Devourer threat." Vexitar bowed formally. "Captain Chen, on behalf of the Zalani Empire and all the species of this galaxy, I thank you for coming to our aid." Chen's expression didn't change. "We're not here for your thanks, Admiral. We're here to eliminate a threat to all life in this galaxy. Your cooperation will make the operation more efficient." The coldness in her voice made Vexitar uncomfortable. This wasn't the response he had expected from people they had begged for help. "Captain, if there's anything we can do to assist, maintain safe distances from combat zones," Chen interrupted. "Evacuate civilian populations to coordinates we will provide. Do not attempt to engage Devourer forces directly. Your weapons are not only ineffective, they interfere with our targeting systems." "I see. And after the threat is eliminated?" For the first time, Chen's expression shifted slightly. Something that might have been a smile played at the corners of her mouth. "After the threat is eliminated, Admiral, we will discuss the new security arrangements for this galaxy." The transmission ended before Vexitar could respond. Over the following months, humanity's response to the Devourer invasion became the most documented military campaign in galactic history. Every species studied the human tactics, trying to understand how they achieved such complete victories with so little apparent effort. The humans never lost a ship. They never retreated from a battle. They never failed to save every civilian population that could be reached in time. Their efficiency was mathematically perfect, but it was their indifference to galactic politics that truly unsettled the other species. When Chancellor Brixton offered to provide supply ships for the human fleet, he was politely told that humans were entirely self-sufficient. When the Clithic insisted on participating in battle plans, they were informed that their inclusion would reduce operational efficiency by 23%. The humans accepted no help, asked for no resources, and showed no interest in the grateful speeches delivered by rescued populations. They simply moved from system to system, deleting Devourers with mechanical precision. Commander Thexari had multiple encounters with human ships during the campaign. Each time, the humans were polite, professional, and utterly impersonal. They treated him and his crew like variables in an equation rather than individuals. "They're not the same species that left us," he confided to his communications officer after one particularly cold interaction. 300 years ago, humans were emotional, unpredictable. These ones are calculated." Maybe that's what it took to develop weapons that can fight the Devourers, she suggested. Thexari wasn't so sure. He had studied the old records of human-alien interactions. Pre-withdrawal humans had been passionate about justice, freedom, and protecting the innocent. They had started wars over principles and made sacrifices for strangers. These new humans saved innocent lives with the same emotional investment that a computer showed when running calculations. They were effective, but there was something disturbing about their complete lack of sentiment. The final major Devourer stronghold was in the Vega system, where the collective had established a breeding facility capable of producing millions of bioships. Every galactic military expert agreed that assaulting such a position would require massive fleets and result in enormous casualties. The humans sent 3 ships. Thexari was part of the observation fleet that watched from a safe distance as the human vessels approached the system. The Devourers had concentrated their entire remaining force there. Over 50,000 bioships of various sizes, plus the massive breeding facility that was larger than most space stations. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it was over, the Vega system contained nothing but empty space and 3 human ships that hadn't sustained so much as a scratch on their hulls. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channels, addressing the entire observation fleet. Devourer threat eliminated. Beginning reconstruction operations. All galactic military forces will report to designated coordination points for briefing on new security protocols. Admiral Vextar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. New security protocols? The galaxy proved unable to defend itself against external threats, Chen replied calmly. Measures will be implemented to prevent future vulnerabilities. As Thexari watched the human ships begin deploying construction equipment that materialized from nowhere, he realized that the galaxy had made a terrible miscalculation. They had prayed for mercy from humanity, and mercy was exactly what they had received. The humans had saved every life that could be saved and eliminated the threat with minimal collateral damage. But mercy, delivered by people who had spent 3 centuries becoming something beyond normal human emotion, came with a price that none of them had considered. The Devourers were gone. But humanity had never said they were planning to leave again. 6 months after the last Devourer was eliminated, Commander Thexari stood in what used to be his own command center on Zalani Prime. The room looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. A human administrator named Director Harrison sat at a desk that hadn't been there the day before. She was reviewing reports on a holographic display, making notes with the calm efficiency that seemed to define all humans now. "Commander," she said without looking up, "your patrol route for this sector has been optimized. The new schedule will reduce fuel consumption by 12% and improve response times to civilian emergencies by 31%. Thexari accepted the data pad she handed him. The new patrol route was indeed more efficient than the one his own tactical officers had designed. It was also completely different from the traditional Zalani approach to border security. "Director, I need to ask, how long will these arrangements continue?" Harrison finally looked up, her expression politely curious. "Which arrangement specifically, Commander?" "The human oversight of our military operations, the reconstruction projects, the new trade regulations." He gestured around the room. "All of this." "Ah." Harrison returned to her reports. "These aren't temporary measures, Commander. They're improvements to galactic infrastructure. The previous system was inefficient and vulnerable to external threats. But our sovereignty has been maintained wherever possible," Harrison interrupted. "Local governments continue to operate. Species maintain their cultural practices. Internal affairs remain under local control, provided they don't impact galactic security or resource allocation efficiency." Thexari felt a familiar frustration. Having this conversation was like arguing with a computer that had been programmed to be polite but inflexible. Director, with respect, you can't just reorganize an entire galaxy because it's more efficient. Harrison paused in her work and looked at him with what might have been genuine curiosity. Why not? The question was asked so simply that Thexari found himself speechless. How do you explain the concept of freedom to someone who sees it as an inefficiency? Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Human administrators had appeared on every major world, not as conquerors, but as helpful organizers. They rebuilt destroyed infrastructure with technology that was decades ahead of anything the local species possessed. They optimized trade routes, eliminated corruption, and solved resource distribution problems that had persisted for centuries. And they did it all with the emotional investment of accountants balancing books. Dr. Fel-Ara had been studying human technology for months, trying to understand how they had become so advanced. Her laboratory on the research station at Proxima was now staffed with human scientists who answered her questions with perfect patience and complete transparency. Your matter replication systems, she said to Dr. Kim, the human xenobiologist. They violate several fundamental laws of physics. They utilize principles that your species hasn't discovered yet, Dr. Kim replied. We can provide you with the basic theory, but practical application requires infrastructure you don't currently possess. How long would it take to build that infrastructure? With human assistance, approximately 40 years. Without it, perhaps 3 centuries, assuming optimal conditions and no major setbacks. Dr. Fel-Ara understood the implication. Any species that wanted access to human-level technology would need human guidance for generations. It was a dependency that ensured human oversight would continue indefinitely. Dr. Kim, why did your people really come back? The human scientist considered the question carefully. Because the galaxy asked us to, but you could have just eliminated the devourers and left again. Yes, we could have. Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display showing galactic population statistics, but analysis indicated that another existential threat would emerge within 2 to 3 centuries. The galaxy lacks the unity and technological base to survive future challenges. So you decided to provide that unity yourselves. We decided to prevent unnecessary suffering, Dr. Kim corrected. The most efficient way to do that was to implement sustainable security measures. It was the same answer they always gave, and it always sounded so reasonable. Chancellor Brixton had tried to organize a coalition of species to demand greater autonomy in galactic affairs. The meeting was held on Korthak Prime, in the Great Assembly Hall where merchant princes had gathered for 1,000 years. They're turning us into pets, Brixton argued to the assembled delegates. Well-fed, safe pets, but pets nonetheless. We make no real decisions anymore. Everything is subject to human optimization. But piracy is down 94%, pointed out a Vorthak representative. Trade disputes have been eliminated entirely. My people are more prosperous than they've been in centuries. At what cost? Brixton demanded. We've traded our independence for security. Perhaps, said an elderly Clithic delegate, but we're alive to debate the trade. Without human intervention, we would all be dead. The debate continued for hours, but Brixton could see he was losing. The human administration was simply too competent. Crime rates were at historic lows. Economic inequality was being systematically eliminated. Infrastructure projects that would have taken decades were completed in months. It was impossible to argue against results that good. The meeting ended without any formal resolutions, but Brixton knew the truth. The galaxy had accepted its new reality. They were safer, healthier, and more prosperous than ever before. The price was that they were no longer truly free to make their own mistakes. Commander Thexari received his final assignment on a crisp morning 6 months later. Director Harrison handed him orders to report to the Human Integration Academy on Terra Nova, where selected officers from all species were being trained in advanced military techniques. This is an honor, Commander, Harrison explained. You'll be part of the first integrated defense force in galactic history. Thexari looked at the orders. The training program would last 2 years. When he returned, he would be qualified to command mixed-species crews using human technology. He would also be thoroughly educated in human strategic doctrine and administrative procedures. Director, may I ask you something personal? Harrison nodded. Are you happy with what your people have become? The question seemed to surprise her. For a moment, her professional mask slipped, and Thexari saw something that might have been uncertainty in her eyes. Happiness is a subjective emotional state that doesn't correlate with optimal outcomes, she said finally. We are satisfied with our efficiency. But are you happy? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. I remember being happy before the withdrawal, but happiness was often irrational. It led to poor decisions and unnecessary conflicts. She looked directly at Thexari. The galaxy is safer now. Billions of beings live better lives than they would have under the old system. If the price of that is our happiness, it seems like a reasonable trade. As Thexari prepared to leave for Terra Nova, he thought about the galaxy he was leaving behind. Human-designed cities were rising on worlds that had been strip-mined by the Devourers. Trade flowed along routes so efficient that scarcity was becoming a historical curiosity. Wars had become impossible because human peacekeepers could appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours. Children who had never known hunger or fear played in parks designed by human urban planners. They would grow up in a galaxy where disease was rare, violence was contained, and every problem had a solution provided by humanity's vast computational resources. They would also grow up never knowing what it meant to make a choice that wasn't optimized by human algorithms. On his last night on Zalani Prime, Thexari stood on the observation deck of his apartment, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the void between galaxies, watching for the next threat that would inevitably come. The galaxy had prayed for mercy, and mercy was exactly what they had received. They had been saved, protected, and guided into an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. They had also been domesticated. Thexari wondered if the humans understood the irony. 3 centuries ago, the galaxy had feared human unpredictability and aggression. They had pushed humanity away because they were afraid of what humans might do if they were allowed to grow too powerful. Now, humanity had returned with power beyond anything the galaxy had imagined, and they were using it to create exactly the kind of ordered, peaceful civilization that the other species had always claimed to want. The galaxy was finally safe from the chaos and uncertainty that humans had once represented. It was also safe from the freedom and possibility that had made that chaos worthwhile. As he watched human construction ships work through the night, building a better tomorrow with mechanical precision, Thexari realized that they had gotten exactly what they had asked for, and they would never be allowed to ask for anything else again.